Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
And we are FAIRtax Guys.
Well, I had an equipment malfunction.
Oh,
I couldn't get it there. These things are absolutely these are the most useful things in the world for FAIRtax. When you go out and you can actually, I've seen people, this time of year with the Liberty tax service and the guy in the Lady Liberty suit.
Yeah, they got one downtown in Ocala. I've seen that.
And I think I'm going to do? I'm going to find one of those cats and I'm going to stand out beside him, maybe 10 feet away with this up there and see how long it takes for the sheriff to come by and ask me to move on.
Why don't you tell people where they can get one of those?
Yes, it's the FAIRtax store. And the address is, you could probably link it right off of fairtax.org. It's fairtaxstore.com, isn't it?
It's .org, fairtaxstore.org.
So you go on there and there's hats, which I need one desperately, and shirts and these and the little card that shows the prebate numbers based on the poverty level, and a palm card that has all of the fun stuff about the FAIRtax on it. The store is just phenomenal.
And I understand from Mike Simmons, who runs the thing, that there has been quite a run on some FAIRtax, especially the palm cards and the prebate cards, as people are wanting to get that kind of information and be able to disseminate it to their friends and family. So we can ask them also to please share this video and tell them all about FAIRtax Power Radio. We're doing a series on the rest of the story, stuff about the FAIRtax that you are not going to hear in the media, and we will get to that momentarily. But first,
that's right, it's Boy Scout Bob. He's starting to fire with his hands together. We're getting ready to light up Congress.gov.
Yeah, I'll kind of go through this as quickly as I can, because we've got to do this every week to illustrate to people just how absurd the tax code is, and we'll see what. I think I've got another one for the Hall of Shame this week, but we'll start with HR 579 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to eliminate the marriage penalty in the income tax brackets. Hey, if you want to eliminate the marriage penalty in the income tax brackets, the FAIRtax does that.
Get rid of the income tax.
Indeed.
Somewhere on page of publication 17, it explains this.
Here's another one, HR 578, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to exclude major professional sports leagues from qualifying as tax-exempt organizations. Hey, under the FAIRtax, there are no tax-exempt organizations. There's no income tax to be exempt from.
Right. Isn't that something? I mean, and let me tell you something. About 15 or 20 years ago, we were listening to Neil Bortz, and I said, this is revolutionary. This is a revolutionary concept. Sometimes revolutions take a little bit of time, and I think we're on the precipice of being able to move that needle in a positive direction to get the FAIRtax in front of a president here in the next few years. Yeah.
Okay. I believe this one caught my eye. They had some of these cool titles on some of these bills. This is the Bad IRS Activities Act, sponsored by Senator Rick Scott right here in Florida. This is S-123. This one has some text in it, and you open up that text, and it says to protect American small business gig workers and freelancers by repealing the burdensome American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 transaction reporting threshold. That's when they want to tell the IRS about every, PayPal payment you get that's $600 or more, and also to rescind certain funding provided to the Internal Revenue Service. So
absolutely.
This is how bad IRS. This is what that stands for. The blocking the adverse and dramatic increased reliance on surveillance activities. That's the Bad IRS Act.
I need a T-shirt like that.
From Senator Rick Scott down here in Florida. We're trying to get him to sponsor the FAIRtax in the Senate, so hopefully we can be successful with that for too much longer. Let me scoot along here. The S-101. This is Marco Rubio again from Florida, and I think this one landed in the Hall of Shame last year and it's probably going to land in the Hall of Shame again this year. A bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to provide a reduced excise tax rate for portable, electronically aerated bait containers. You remember that?
That's good. I know the shrimp industry is really excited about that.
Oh mercy! Oh well, that's just out of your mind. And there's one more here I wanted
A
to get
lobbyist
to.
involved in that one.
Oh, absolutely. Here's another one. S45. This is Senator Cardin from Maryland, and he was proposing a tax reform plan one time. But this is the Small Business Tax Fairness and Compliance Simplification Act. Senator, the FAIRtax does that. Get on board.
I think they're really, I think everybody in Washington's going, oh my gosh, we're going to have to try to figure out how to keep our gravy train coming in the midst of all of this turmoil.
Oh, mercy.
Don't you know that's what they're sitting up, because they have to understand what we're doing, what's happening. And the we the people part of it, this is what's exciting for me, and I'll let you get back to it. People are starting to really dig in now. And you just said in the last show that folks are going to the FAIRtax store and getting palm cards and the little cards that show the prebate rates, et cetera, and making it happen. This is exciting. I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning going, FAIRtax.
Yes. Let's continue telling the rest of the story about the FAIRtax that you will not hear in especially the broadcast and print media. And most people on social media that are trying to shoot down the FAIRtax won't tell you this either. And this is really a major advance in taxology. I guess I'll just make up that word with the FAIRtax. The FAIRtax will reduce tax evasion dramatically.
Oh, yeah.
Can you imagine? The IRS now admit for years and decades, they kind of downplayed, well, there's really not that much evasion going on. Now, just recently, they have now admitted illegal tax evasion costs the Treasury around $1 trillion a year. Now, imagine what would happen if you could eliminate this evasion. That would be a major step in reducing the federal budget deficit without raising taxes. If you can just collect what's owed to you without having to raise the rate anymore and get $1 trillion more or close to $1 trillion a year more, wouldn't you do it?
Oh, without a doubt. You could start with a clean sheet of paper and design a tax system that is any more fraud prone or error prone than the federal income tax. There's no way you could come up with it. But the thing about the FAIRtax is everybody that goes and buys something at the store pays the tax. International travelers, undocumented workers, however you want to say it, the drug dealers, and the ladies of the night, and other such nefarious activities. All
people who don't read publication 17 and report the fair market value of the stuff they steal.
That's right. That's in there.
We got to keep going back to that.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to run out of time just laughing at this stuff. It's just incredible. Well, so the income tax is ridiculously easy to evade, since it depends on people honestly reporting their income and claiming only those credits, deductions, and exemptions that they are legally entitled to. And the reality is people underreport their income and claim credits and tax deductions they are not entitled to.
You don't say.
Yeah.
People will actually, are you kidding me? Do people actually do that?
Oh, it's unbelievable. No, it's believable. Multiplied billions of dollars have been lost to criminals who claim big refunds on fraudulent tax returns. Billions more have been lost to identity thieves who steal legitimate refunds from honest taxpayers like you and me. The IRS doesn't have the manpower or the technology to catch all those cheaters. Do you realize that using a DOS 1.0 computer system in the 21st century, 2023 no less, it's nearly impossible to calculate based on a 2 meg hard drive?
Now, even if the IRS gets all of this additional funding that was earmarked for them in the last Congress to hire all these new agents and update their technology and all, even if they get all that, and I say even if, because there are some bills in this Congress to deny portions of that funding to the Internal Revenue Service. Some people want to hire Border Patrol agents instead of IRS agents. Some people are saying we're going to, not give you another dime until you can prove that all your people are not tax cheats. Thus is that. There's a lot going on as to whether the IRS will actually see all that money. But even if we assume that they do, they will still not have the manpower or the technology to catch all the cheaters. And the funny thing is, when you send in your 1040 form, if you're going to try to catch cheaters, the cheaters do not identify themselves as such on their 1040. There's not a big banner across the top. I am cheating on this tax return. If you're going to if you're going to catch the cheaters, you have to treat everyone, including honest taxpayers, as if they were cheaters, and subject them to this, painful scrutiny that the IRS does. And of course, the tax code is so ridiculously complicated. Honest taxpayers can't fully comply with it because they don't understand it all.
And I don't think the Internal Revenue Service customer service representatives understand much of it either. No, I think there's probably nobody with a head big enough to handle all of the voluminous pages and this little minutia of detail that come into the tax code. And some of it is referenced in the Congress.gov reports on the program every week. Well, the subject of tax evasion is covered in several white papers published on FAIRtax.org. You can look up under the research tab, click evasion. It's right there, FAIRtax.org, research tab, click evasion, read the FAIRtax, the expected effect on tax evasion. Jade Wally, CPA, has studied the FAIRtax extensively. He concludes that the FAIRtax would reduce illegal tax evasion by 95%. 95%. That's like getting an extra $1 trillion a year without raising taxes. And do you think we need to get $1 trillion a year more in the federal coffers right now to pay down this ridiculously high debt that we have? Absolutely.
Well, yeah, whether they'd actually pay the debt down or they just spend that too is entirely a different matter. The FAIRtax bill is a revenue bill. It has to do with collecting the money. It has nothing to do with how to spend it.
That's correct.
Why we say that it's really not partisan in its intention. We're going to collect the same amount of money for the government that we're getting with the income tax. We're still going to have the debate on how to spend it. So one side wants to spend it on this, and one side wants to spend it on this, and that, and the other, and that debate will continue to happen with the FAIRtax. But just think about it. A system whereby you are asked to report your income, you're asked to figure out what deductions and credits you're entitled to, figure that all out yourself and send it in, versus a tax that is included in the price of everything you buy. Right. Which one is going to be easier to evade?
Simple and fair. And it is so life-changing all across the board that people are kind of going, really? And then all of a sudden we have people now, because of the exposure in the news, are going, wow, this really is something that we need to take a look at and drill in. And it'll grow exponentially now, Bob. It will be absolutely amazing how fast this thing will spread across the country like wildfire, I believe, now that there are folks out there who are tackling and being disciplined about understanding exactly what happens with the FAIRtax, not just looking at the headlines that Washington throws out or that the politicians are putting in their commentaries on social media.
Now, I have heard that the FAIRtax will spawn a gigantic black market, where people can buy things tax-free. That is just not consistent with what we've seen with current sales taxes. After the FAIRtax is passed, the huge majority of retail sales in this country will continue to take place at the big box stores like Walmart and Target and Costco and places like that. Of course, those retailers wouldn't dare try to help people evade the FAIRtax because they know that the state departments of revenue are going to be, it's a very simple calculation. How much did you sell? Therefore, how much tax should you have collected? They can figure that out to the penny really easily. And besides that, retailers are going to get to keep a small percentage of the FAIRtax they collect, which means they're incentivized to collect the tax, not help people evade it. So if we're going to go for the tax
like this that has the number on it, I can't get it up to my camera, but I mean, this is what you get at the store, and it says, I bought this, I bought a loaf of bread, I bought a pack of gum, the subtotal is this, the state tax, the city tax, the 2%, the 6.75%, the fair tax would be on there too. Total $47.
Okay.
And
Well, so I'm saying the evasion topic is something you're not going to hear much of in the press at all, because that is just so overwhelmingly
right.
in favor of the fair tax, that the folks that are trying to continue with the income tax system because they're making lots of money and deriving power from it, they're just not going to touch this subject. But there's part of the story you're not going to hear.
Well,
The fair tax reduces tax evasion by a tremendous number.
And the retailers get a cut for
we mentioned that
transactions.
Okay, let's move on to the next segment that you're going to hear in the media that's wrong. You will hear them say, well, the fair tax gets rid of the FICA and the Medicare taxes from your payroll. Therefore, those programs will no longer have any money and they go away. Okay, the rest of the story, listen to me closely. The fair tax does not defund Social Security and Medicare. It doesn't do it.
Yep.
It does eliminate the payroll taxes that support those two programs. But of course, then you try to claim that the fair tax defunds that program. It's just not true at all. Truth is, listen, both Social Security and Medicare, they are going broke faster than originally believed. We touched on this here on FAIRtax Power Radio a while back. Steve Hayes wrote a chairman's report about this a while back, that there is a new budget, Congressional Budget Office report that now says at the current rate of depletion, the Social Security Trust Fund will be gone in just 10 years, 2033, 10 years from now. And when that happens, Social Security recipients are going to see a drastic cut in their benefits.
Yeah, without a doubt. Just 10 years from now. In 1940, here's the way it calculates out. In 1940, there were 159.4 workers contributing to the system for each Social Security recipient. 159.4 to 1.
And that has dropped down to what?
2.8 to 1.
From 159 workers contributing each recipient, now it's just 2.8. Fewer and fewer people are working for a paycheck. You hear the phrase gig economy.
Mm-hmm.
There are just fewer and fewer people working for a paycheck, and only the people working for a paycheck under the current system are contributing to Social Security and Medicare. If you make your living in the gig economy, if you make your living, through investments and capital gains and stuff like that, you are not paying anything into the Social Security system. And guess what? It's the richest people in the country that are not necessarily working for a paycheck. If they are, it's a very small percentage of what they get.
They get dividends and income from investments, et cetera. They're not necessarily
stock dividends and buying and selling stock. They make capital gains. They get dividends, investment income like that. That is not taxed by the Social Security or Medicare payroll taxes. So the system, again, you could not start with a clean sheet of paper and design one that's any worse than what we've got now. You just can't do it.
So dysfunctional. By funding Social Security and Medicare with a payroll tax on workers' wages, it follows that only people paying into the system are those working for a paycheck. The fair tax expands the tax base for Social Security and Medicare from those just working for a paycheck to everyone whose spending exceeds the poverty level. Remember the fair tax prebate. The fair tax would ensure the future solvency of Social Security and Medicare without massive tax increases or draconian cuts in benefits, because, as we've said many times on the show, not only will the legitimate purchaser of an item come in, or the people that are actually already an income tax payer, you have the international travelers, you have folks that are here on a work visa or legally, or however you want to put it. You have the drug dealers and the ladies of the night in there, or anybody that might be living and working in an underground cash economy. They end up at the cash register to buy something at some point, And so they become, what is the number? It goes like from 115 or so million taxpayers to 300 and some change million people that would be now participating in the collection of revenue for the operation of the federal government through the fair tax. I think that's right.
Oh, I tell you, you'd have to ask Jade. I think he has those numbers off the top of his head, or Steve probably has them. But the number of taxpayers becomes dramatically more with the fair tax, because again, you're extending the tax base from just people who are working to people who don't have income, people who are on unemployment, people who are not making a paycheck and contributing to the Social Security and Medicare system are still consuming things.
That's right. A lot of consuming going on in the country. It's time to make sure that we get the income tax gone and a consumption tax, specifically HR 25 and the fair tax enacted, passed, and it is not a political impossibility.
It isn't. Yeah, that's something that you hear a lot. Well, it's a good idea, but it'll never pass. I mean, if I had $1 for every time I heard that, I could retire. Well, I am retired, but anyway, it's the fair tax. I could retire again. Yeah, the fair tax again, strongly opposed by the political establishment in both parties. Now we're trying not to be partisan here. Special interests in the lobbyists are constantly seeking favorable tax treatment under the income tax. That does not mean that passing the fair tax will be impossible, because no matter how much power these political elites seem to have over us, the inconvenient truth is that they work for us, and there are a lot more of us than there are of them. Okay?
Yeah, we the people still hold the ultimate power, Bob.
Yeah, there was a time when the idea of women voting was considered preposterous. That'll never happen. You know, it did. Ditto for black people voting. People said that'll never happen. It did. So people will never go to the moon. We did. There were lots of things that people say are impossible, but they do. The political elites even missed the last presidential election. Not
Donald Trump would be president.
Well, you got to go back 2 elections to get this one. They thought it was impossible for Trump to become president, and he did. So all of this, it's just politically impossible, is just not true if there is a big enough groundswell from we the people demanding that we get rid of this corrupt, incomprehensible, constantly shifting income tax system and replace it with a fair tax. Let me ask you something, Bob. From your own experience here, how many people have you explained the fair tax to and they rejected it as a bad idea?
Well, my question, if they say, well, I don't think that's going to be a good thing. I said, so you'd rather have the income tax and you'd rather deal with the federal government through the Internal Revenue Service every year in the most beautiful time of the year, from winter into spring. You would rather be climbing through your shoebox and pulling out all your receipts. And, even if H&L Brock, as somebody used to erroneously call them, we're doing your taxes and you were paying $125, you're still having to deal with that, except you get, your refund at, when you get your taxes done. But I mean, people think, I don't get it. And then what happens is at some point in time, they wake up in the middle of the night and they go, I understand. I demand that the fair tax become the rule of the land.
As I said, I have had nobody that I've talked to in person think, oh, that's a rotten idea. I've seen some trolls on social media that are just going to say that's a bad idea, and they're not going to listen to anything anybody. That's just a bad idea. So
they try to derail. There are people that work to derail substantive conversations in social media all the time.
Yeah. When you explain to somebody, you can bring home your whole paycheck, you can get a tax refund every month, you'll never have to file an income tax return again. Most people say, hey, why aren't we doing that? That was my mother's reaction. Why aren't we doing that already? It makes so much sense. What we say at the end of every episode is true. Once you understand it, you'll demand it. The only reason the fair tax hasn't passed is that not enough people understand it yet. We're working on it.
Well, and I think so. I think it's happening even now, even as we're working on these programs week after week. Well, the IRS is one of, if it's not the single most despised government agency ever created. And if you can think back to a time where there wasn't an income tax, there was no IRS back then. With the fair tax coming to a vote in the House, we expect that to be sometime this year. It's going to be a politically hard opportunity to go on public record as being a friend of the IRS and wanting to keep it. So that's where the pressure needs to come from the citizens of this great nation to your elected representatives and say, why aren't we stepping up and doing this now with $31+ trillion in debt? The whole economy could collapse in a house of cards that's built like this.
Yeah. Why are you voting to let the government help itself to my paycheck before I get it? Why are you voting to let the government be privy to the personal, intimate details of my personal finances? Why are you making me fill out tax returns?
It's crazy. The political establishment has dismissed for 20 years. The political establishment has dismissed since 1999 the fair tax as impractical or impossible, but somehow the idea just won't die. Fair tax supporters have not given up and gone away at the establishment would hope that we would. Now, if we persist, and that means you, Bob, me, everybody in AFFT, Americans for Fair Taxation, those of you who are listening and following us and out there beating the drum for the fair tax, if we persist, we can most certainly add getting rid of the income tax to the list of political impossibilities that become reality. And then Bob P. will truly be retired.
Yes, absolutely. I would love nothing better than to have to retire this program because we have got the fair tax pact. There is so much going on in the media. This is our fourth rest of the story program here on FAIRtax Power Radio. We still got a little bit more to get into. I'm not sure that what's left can fill the entire episode next week, but we'll get into to at least one more area where we're telling the rest of the story. Of course, the fair tax replaces the income tax. Let's summarize what we've gone through so far. The fair tax replaces the income tax. It is not corporate welfare. If you get rid of the corporate income tax, you've lowered the cost of doing business. Prices go down. If you tax corporations, prices go up for everybody. It's not a plot to shift the tax burden from the wealthy to middle and lower class taxpayers. We've shot that down. It does not punish seniors unfairly. The fair tax rate is not going to cost you 30% of your income in taxes with this thing, even though that is the rate that most people are using to describe the fair tax. Tax evasion goes away dramatically, almost entirely, down by about 95%, according to Jade Wally's study. It does not defund Social Security and Medicare, and it's not politically impossible. That's what we've covered here so far on FAIRtax Power Radio with our Rest of the Story series, and we will continue that next week with at least one more. And we heard from a lady that wants to talk to us. You're going to call her,
yes, sir.
And hopefully on
there's a lot of that going. There's a lot of things that we can talk about next week in the midst of finishing up the rest of the story from folks that are out there communicating on social media or phone calls to the fair tax number.
So again, we urge you to share these videos, let your family and friends know about it. We're on, we stream live on Facebook every week. That's if you really want to go back to the archive, go to the FAIRtax Guys YouTube channel. It's under the little live tab. Everything that we stream live to YouTube is there for you to review at your own leisure. I would suggest you go back and at least begin at the beginning of this Rest of the Story series and learn more about the fair tax. And again, we love to hear your questions and comments at the FAIRtaxGuys@gmail.com. And that's going to wrap up this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. We're all out of time again for another week. I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
The FAIRtax Guys, once again, reminding you that the fair tax is the only truly fair tax. And once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
So tell me how it works.
You know, it's probably changed since the last time I saw it, but the short answer would be, you want to take this one?
Oh, sure. Okay. Imagine bringing home everything you make. You don't get taxed for saving or accumulating wealth, and your boss doesn't get taxed more even if he pays you more.
Wow, now see, that's amazing.
So the end result of all that is the cost of producing products and running a business goes down, so things cost less. And on top of all that, imagine every criminal, non-citizen, and under-the-table worker also paying taxes.
That's amazing.
That's the fair tax. We tax what you consume as you consume it.